For almost 4 years ago, the EU came up with the Corona Recovery Fund, a fund supposed to help member states to recover from financial debts as a result of COVID-19. Now, as you can imagine, some issues arise with this fund, such as the price tag of a whopping 800 billion euros, which is basically a debt and it will take up to 2058 to repay that debt. And that's not the only issue, because some argue that it's also in contradiction with some treaties of the EU. If that isn't enough, we're going to discuss the case with Pieter Cleppe. Peter, thank you so much for being here with us today. The
Thank
Corona
you.
Recovery Fund. What are the main issues we're facing with it?
I think there's so many problems with it. Let's maybe start with the experience so far. The European Public Prosecutor at the end of last year concluded that almost 2 billion euro was already problematic, was already vulnerable to fraudulent cases. And the majority of the money then had not even been spent. And I think this is very unfortunate because when this, massive scheme was decided, as you say, almost 4 years ago, a lot of people have warned against it. I remember an Italian prosecutor who was very successful in, prosecuting fraud committed by organized crime in Italy. He said, look, a lot of that money will end up in the hands of organized crime, or institutions are simply too vulnerable to it. And he said it was irresponsible to go on with it. But obviously that was not not a reason to, to basically not go on with it.
So the fund is vulnerable for fraud. Given that, how come so that the EU still continue to bring this fund into life, into practice?
Indeed, as you mentioned, we had the COVID crisis, and this was basically used as an excuse to organize another round of transfers within the EU. There's so many transfers. There's the regular EU budget, which already amounts to 1,000 billion euro over 7 years, and then this scheme comes on top of it. Now, the difference between the regular EU budget is that member states do not simply just have to pay into it every 7 years. No, what happens is that the European Commission goes on the market and takes out a loan on the back of European citizens, and at one point the money will have to be repaid. They have not even decided how these loans will be repaid, but in all likelihood, I think what they will do is to take out a new loan to pay back for the old loan. And what this means is that this, COVID recovery fund is likely to become permanent. And also, I think it's much more attractive for politicians, to finance spending with this fund. Why? Because they don't have to have this big fight in the EU between net payers and net receivers every 7 years. No, they can just roll it over, as they say in finance, which means take out a new loan to pay back the old loan. I think it's very important not to try this at home. This is something that governments do, and they get away with it because they are able to to suppress interest rates through central banks and then create inflation. Let savers pay for it. But it's a very worrying development.
Wait, I want to go back to what you said previously. We are talking about tax money. These billions is basically tax money from EU citizens. And now the EU can just spend it however they please. There's no control over it whatsoever.
There is clearly insufficient control. This has been, for example, said by Professor Adriaan Schout, a Dutch scholar who came out with a study on it for Dutch think tank Klingendahl. As I mentioned, the European Public Prosecutor has already been sending out warning signals. Also, Johan van Overtveld, who's the chairman of the European Parliament's Budgetary Committee. And I must say, for once, the European Parliament has tried to play a constructive role. They have tried to force the European Commission to disclose at least, I think it was the top 100 receivers of the money from this COVID recovery fund. But ultimately, they have failed. The European Commission has gone along to a degree, and then suddenly they came up with a proposal which basically scrapped this obligation. So now we only will know which state institution in the member states will have paid out the funds, but we will not know which company has received all that taxpayers' money. And of course, for transparency, this is a terrible thing.
Yeah, because obviously we vote for our representatives. They are in the European Parliament and it's their job to do the checks and balances. How is it possible that besides, regardless of that, the European Commission doesn't have to be transparent? Because if you would do this in your national government, you would have a huge issue. But how is it so that the European Commission can just go on and do whatever they want to do with this billions of euros?
I think that's a very good question, Scarlett, and frankly, I don't have a proper answer. I mean, I was trying to find analysis looking at this enormous spending in a critical way, and I must say it's very difficult. It's very difficult to find.
Hmm.
The people I mentioned, yeah, the institutions I mentioned, they came up with some kind of criticism. Of course, it's still early days. It's difficult to determine that everything corrupt and problematic when a lot of the money has not even been spent yet. But I think you can say that indeed, as you suggest, because it's at the European level, so far away from national political scrutiny that the chance that things go wrong is much bigger. There's a lot less media in Brussels to cover all the many things that are going on. It's also quite technical and boring in a way. But once in a while we see problems with EU spending. And this was then with regular spending. For example, we saw that there was a bridge to nowhere built in Hungary. I remember back in the days once. There was a ski slope built on an island in Denmark where it would never snow. And typically these kind of silly small examples, they capture the attention of people and they make it into the media. But of course, I mean, these are very small amounts in the grand scheme of things that are being wasted.
Yeah,
The
because I
big
wanted
fraud.
to touch upon that. Why is mainstream media not covering such an important topic?
They are, but only very scarcely. I think it has to do with the fact that the mainstream media are, in general, quite docile, also for the policies of governments, and they would go after politicians when these politicians would not be, sort of in the center left mainstream mindset of many journalists. And yeah, occasionally you have journalists that would go into this. But I think in general, if you are, well, I think in general, journalists, they don't really mind a lot of government spending because of their center left mindset. I think 70 or 80% are, center left. So I think this is the main reason why then they will be less inclined to, go along with the center right, point of view that government spending tends to, be inefficient or in the worst case, vulnerable to corruption and fraud. So I think that's the main reason.
Personally, I think for a lot of people, it's very painful to hear that in a time that a lot of people are struggling financially, when billions of tax money is being spent and there's no transparency on it, there's even a tendency that there's fraud involved, it can be very painful. What does it say about our European institutions that they are, no, well, how to say it mildly, not very well at spending tax money?
I think it shows that there's a very profound problem with the EU institutions. You have to know that in 2020, when this fund was agreed, I mean, for years and for decades, we already had scandals and examples of fraud and misspending and inefficient spending of European taxpayers' money. The European Court of Auditors is the EU institution that is, responsible to monitor the spending of the European Union. And year after year after year, they have been complaining that the rate of errors in EU spending is unacceptably high. So you would think that first we should focus on, improving the existing EU spending before we start even think to create, new pots of European money. But that's clearly not how, in the middle of the crisis, the European leaders thought. Actually, Angela Merkel, the former German chancellor, she was the big driver behind all this. And the only one resisting a little bit was the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte, together with the governments of Sweden, Denmark, Austria. They called them the Frugal Four. At some point, Finland was also on board a little bit. And they resisted, and in the end, they just give in. With the excuse that, yeah, this is a one-off. It's only going to be, once that we're going to spend 800 billion euro. Well, some of these funds are loans, to be honest, but at very, low interest rates. So in effect, this is also a gift of some sort. But as I explained, it will not be a one-off because it will be likely appealing to politicians to say, oh, let's just take out a new loan to pay back the old loan. This scheme will be very hard to get rid of.
Moving forward, what can there be done from the European Parliament to prevent a permanent fund from establishing?
I think sunlight is the best disinfectant. So the demand of the European Parliament to at least disclose the top 100 recipients. I mean, this is 101. It's crazy that this very modest demand is already not accepted by EU governments and the European Commission. So I think that should be the top priority now. Insert at least some transparency into the system. I hope that's something that both the right and the left should agree on. I mean, they're always complaining about Orban receiving EU money, but then in practice they are strengthening the risks with EU taxpayers' money by not even applying very very modest transparency safeguards. So I think that's the very start. Of course, ideally this fund has to be scrapped. Some of the or as much as possible of the money should be recovered and transferred back to taxpayers. But of course, that's hopelessly naive, I'm afraid.
Pieter Cleppe, thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank you to our viewers for watching.